Well, good evening, IFL Nation, and welcome back. It is week 17 of the Indoor Football League season as we enter July. This is the make or break time where teams either get in or get dropped out of the playoff picture. Which side they wind up on, it's up to them. It is 7 o'clock p.m. over here on the East Coast, folks, which means it is Wager Wednesday in the Indoor Football League. I'm delighted to be back with you here this evening. Appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to take a look at some of the goings on around the Indoor Football League. We are in the final 3-week stretch here. For those of you who are new to the Indoor Football League or to my channel, welcome aboard. My name is Alex Schuberth. I am a huge fan of the Indoor Football League and an IFL contributor over at Sports Coast to Coast, which is a Pacific Northwest-based sports forum site that specializes in the coverage of the Indoor Football League and its member teams specifically. Got team-by-team rosters, breakdowns, all up to date. We've got game previews and recaps, basically covering A through Z of everything that you want related to the Indoor Football League. I've got a link down in the description. There you will also find a written version of this week's post that I put up just about an hour ago. Today was a little bit of a busy day for me, but managed to get it up. And with that, it is time to get this week's show started. Give me one moment here. Get our screen shared. And here we go. Like I said, it is week 17. Teams have played either 13 or 14 games to this point. So you may have a bye, you might not. But this is crunch time, both for the teams on the field and for us as we try to get back above 500 for our record on the slips. So before we do get going today, I do want to take a moment of reflection and a celebration of life of former Northern Arizona Wrangler special teams coordinator and defensive line coach David Moran, who tragically lost his life, we learned on Tuesday, as a result of a heart attack that he had suffered just hours before the Wranglers kickoff on Saturday night against the San Diego Strike Force. Moran was a valued member of the Wranglers and to the IFL as a whole. He had made himself a coach in Prescott Valley since the team's inception in 2021, helped the Wranglers to a championship in 2022, and was loved by everybody in the Northern Arizona community and well-respected in the IFL community. A life gone far too soon. We wish David Moran's family, friends, community, everybody that had the chance of getting to know him, all the prayers, all the wishes in this trying time. So with that, let's cover some ground on what we'll be going over today. Week 16, we sprinkled kind of a little too hard on favorites to win on the money line, but as we've pointed out for a few weeks, that's been the quickest path to kind of bringing the record back up to where we want it to be. We ended up 5-3 on the week, with 3 of those being our outright favorites. This marks for the first time all season where we have had at least one method wind up in net gain for 3 consecutive weeks. In the grand scheme of things, especially compared to last year, it's not a whole lot to brag about, but it is a positive development in a season that has quite honestly lacked that from our picks and predictions standpoint. So it's all about riding that positive momentum and trying to finish off this season as strong as we can. We hope that springboard point will be week 17, which will have 7 games on the schedule, pretty evenly distributed this time, as opposed to what we've seen for the past couple weeks. We've got 4 games on Saturday evening, to go along with 3 games on Sunday. The Green Bay Blizzard and Tulsa Oilers have a bye this week as they get a nice week off on the 4th of July week to kind of get the R&R and prepare for the final 2-game stretch in front of them. It is a pivotal week on the 3-leg parlay front where we've only had 1 success so far. Our preseason goal was 4. We basically need to be perfect on the parlays from here on out if we want to keep that goal. It's no doubt going to be tough, but we're going to put an attempt together here. I'm going to try to get it done, get our second parlay win of the year. We'll also go over the futures forecasts and trends and kind of answer some questions. Which favorites are some pretty solid bets, and are any underdogs worth maybe a $5 dart throw here or there? So here are our results from week 16. And I suppose we can go through these in the order that they're presented here. What a game to start out with between the Frisco Fighters and San Antonio Gunslingers. This was an outstanding ball game. Between San Antonio and Frisco, basically trading punch for punch. We got a whole bunch of special teams plays sprinkled in there as well. Frisco tried to slow the pace of the game down, grind out long scoring drives, which they did very well to their credit. Didn't wind up mattering as far as the over-under went. It ended up the highest over-under total in recorded history at 110.5. And thanks to a Frisco walk-off touchdown in the dying seconds of the game, not only did those heroics give the Fighters a 58-57 win, that play cashed the over for anybody who was brazen enough to go with over 110.5. Just an absolutely outstanding game on every front. The perfect way to start off a week of indoor football. Then we have Jacksonville and Sioux Falls. The Storm were the heaviest favorite on the money line available on DraftKings, and they laid an absolute dud on us, which is made even more infuriating by the fact that the team that they were up against, the Jacksonville Sharks, have been the kings of bad second halves this season. Yet, it wound up being Jacksonville, led by new quarterback signing Caleb Barker, and an outstanding defensive effort in the second half, guiding the Sharks to their first win in the IFL against a team that's not named the Tulsa Oilers. So that game ended up being 36-28. Jacksonville wins. They keep their ever faint hopes of stealing away that 4th seed in the East alive, at least mathematically. And on top of that, it eliminates Sioux Falls from playoff contention. So last year's reigning Eastern Conference champs are out. We'll have a new representative out of the East this year. Going to Green Bay and Tulsa, we took Green Bay on the money line. We honestly could have took them on the spread, but we opted to increase our chances of the win. That's precisely what we got. Green Bay scored the first 23 points of this game, and a shorthanded Tulsa was simply no match to come back from that hole. Absolutely dominant game from Green Bay, start to finish, both ends of the ball. They end up getting the win 54-20. They stay just a nose ahead of Frisco for the number 1 seed in the East. That still firmly belongs to the Blizzard if they can win their remaining games in weeks 18 and 19. Meanwhile, for Tulsa, they have an uphill climb to get back to the playoffs, starting with next week with their game against Quad City. The Sugar Skulls and Gladiators played a pretty interesting game down in Rio Rancho. It was another hot start for the Gladiators, scoring the first 17 points of the game. And then Tucson kind of took charge from there. It was really scary. They went on a 32-6 run, led by 9 points. But then the Gladiators took the brunt of that, recovered nicely, finished the game on a 21-0 run. They end up winning this game by 12 by a score of 44-32. Both teams now sit at 2-11 on the season. as the Gladiators, despite their record, still looking to compete night in, night out. Pretty admirable effort from them. Perhaps I've been treating them too harshly throughout the course of this year. San Diego and Northern Arizona, a matchup between two teams that were in the playoff picture at the time. Game started out pretty well for the Wranglers, which, considering what happened prior to kickoff, was a very gutsy, valiant effort. Eventually, San Diego got enough plays, some takeaways late in the game, some clutch touchdowns down the stretch. They end up beating the Wranglers in Prescott Valley, 57-43. The Strike Force now third in the East entering this week, while the Wranglers, a game back of fourth, currently outside the playoff picture, with a brutal schedule awaiting them, beginning with their game on Sunday night, which we'll get to in a little bit. The Bay Area Panthers and Vegas Nighthawks. This was the classic. Let's start out with 50-plus first half points and then do absolutely nothing in the second half. I knew going in that this pick was kind of up against it, especially where Bay Area is the kings of the over. But this just happened to be the rare game where Vegas didn't quite reach their offensive ceiling. Bay Area limited them well, particularly in the second half. And a strong Vegas effort actually nearly stole a win for them. But they had a game-winning field goal attempt, missed the mark, allowing Bay Area to escape with their second consecutive 2-point win on the road. This one ending 37-35, 72 points, no good for us. Game in Glendale between the Barnstormers and the Arizona Rattlers. This was another one where we took the favorite on the points, simply out of necessity, and it wound up being a no-brainer. I kind of went into that one thinking, hey, let's not overthink this. Arizona's the team chasing the playoffs. Iowa's the team chasing for answers leading into 2025. Game played exactly like that. It was the usual game from Arizona, 50-plus points on offense. Dalton Sneed, crazy efficient. Good games from Shannon Brooks and Jamal Miles. And the Barnstormers just had too many turnovers to keep up. That game ended 55-26. Arizona advancing to 9-5. That much closer to yet another playoff appearance for the Snakes. Last game on the docket, we had Quad City and Massachusetts in Monday Night Football. A very good game from start to finish. The Pirates, for them, this was pretty much their best game since their home game against Iowa in early April. They played extremely well, both ends of the ball. Thomas Owens had a turn back the clock game with 4 touchdowns. Robinson chipped in 3 of his own. And it was kind of a regression to the mean type of game for Quad City, particularly on the defensive front. But they just got stymied by a mass defense that was pretty much having their way all game long in terms of dictating the game script. Final score in that one was 52-35 in favor of the Pirates, who clinched their 6th playoff appearance in as many seasons of existence, dating back to their brief NAL tenure. So those are the Week 16 results. Factoring those into the year-to-date stuff, we can see that our spread record is still above 500. We've been pretty good with identifying teams on the handicap, in particular, those underdogs with a 14-8 record when we're backing them against the handicap. Our over-under results, very interesting. 22 overs, 12 unders, and we've split them each dead even. But it's really been the money line. We had money line magic last year. We are having no money line magic this year. Just 4 underdog picks out of 14 we've gotten right. And the favorites, even though we are above 500 at this point, we're only barely above that on a bet type that has been roughly 70% efficient throughout the season. So, like I said, the money line magic just hasn't been there. Maybe we can change that a little bit these last 3 weeks, but it's been brutal, no doubt. Our 3-leg parlay of the week from last week fizzled out first leg. That last play in the Frisco San Antonio game did that in. Quad City didn't cover anyway on Monday night, so it wouldn't have mattered. I just think it's funny that the one leg that we got right was the one with the longest odds, with Bay Area outright to win at just shy of +0.25. So year to date, like I said, we are trending upwards, even if only slightly. We are hovering around the 7 to 8% ROI loss on the season. So our goal again, try to get that as close to even as possible. If we can have a stretch of time where we can say weeks 14 through 19, we made X% on that stretch, we'd be doing pretty darn well. And those are your graphs showing us our progression week by week for both dollars and percentage. And you can see that percentage is trickling back to zero. Again, that's an unintended advantage of being down on the season, is if you can string together enough weeks of being even, you do gravitate closer to even on the season. But we want to be above that. So that's what we're going to try to do. On the season, our bet types are progressing pretty interestingly, particularly the over-under record, which is now dead even with 53 games going over, 53 going under, and that one push, which was, I believe, Bay Area and Northern Arizona in week 8 or 9. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I do remember with 95% certainty that it was that game. Unders ruled the day last week, 2 and 6, or 6 of the 8 games going under, 2 going over. And Bay Area continues to be that under money-making machine. 10 out of 13 games to the under. Tucson and Duke City with their game going under last week, they are now 9 and 4 to the under. And the Pirates with their stunning performance, 9 games out of 14 to the under for them. Frisco, best team to the over, 10 and 4. Granted, though each of the last 2 have had the over cash on the final play of the game after the clock hit 000. So a little bit of luck there, but with a really good offense like Frisco's, with how efficient they've been in the past month or so, shouldn't come as much of a surprise. That 88-89 mark, still holding up pretty well. We had some surprises last week, kind of tilt things more towards even. But it's still a convincing advantage to the over when it's 88.5 or below. And the under, equally as effective when 89.5 or above. And for the spread, as that graphic on the top right indicates, betting underdogs on the spread has been arguably the best way of making money on IFL games, not just this season, but last season as well. I believe it was a 55% win rate for underdogs on the spread last year, but might be something worth noting as we move forward this year and into 2025. We have a new worst team against the spread in the Sioux Falls Storm, with Jacksonville and Quad City not too far behind. Arizona, Frisco, and Mass also 2 games below 500 as far as the spread goes. Meanwhile, we have an interesting team in the best teams against the spread section, with Duke City in third, rounding out the podium with an 8-5 record against the spread. Pretty interesting when I saw that kind of pop up as a result when doing my number crunching. Not really much of an advantage home versus road against the spread if you were trying to evaluate that way. Maybe slight advantage home team, but that is it. It's a little bit of a stark contrast to last year when I think it was home teams against the spread were pretty ridiculously tilted in their favor. And for the money line, we're still looking at that 70% clip, even though the underdogs did steal a few games outright in week 16. DraftKings eligible games, you're winning 2 out of 3 bets if you do it that way, but not making much money. And slight advantage to home teams who are 5 games above 500 when going with outright betting. And we look at our team by team result page here. A lot of these trends that we brought up last week still holding true heading into this week. Bay Area unders, Duke City under, Duke City spread, Tucson unders. There's a lot to glean from this data. The hope is just picking something that winds up making a little bit of sense, along with seeing if those matchups play into it. We got a question here from Monica. Thanks for tuning in. Do you think the league having more parity this season compared to last season is showing in the spread results? I certainly think it does. Really, the premise is try to make that spread as close as possible to where people are betting 50-50 each side. And even like we saw last year, underdogs were convincingly winning games from a spread standpoint, covering, I'd have to get you a number as to what the 2023 success rate was for underdogs against the spread, but I can tell you it was around the 55-56% neighborhood. But the league-wide parity definitely does factor into that a little bit. I'm curious to see what the final weeks have to offer, especially in terms of teams that have already been eliminated from playoff contention, how that might factor into initial opening lines, our analysis, things like that. So it'll be very interesting to see going forward how these shake out. So now it's time for the usual disclaimers. Lines and odds are going to come from DraftKings. We do have a few games this week where the money line is not available on DraftKings. So once ESPN bet lines become available, I will fill those in my written section. But our pool of available selections will come strictly from DraftKings, as we've done all season long. We are doing this for entertainment, curiosity purposes. It's not necessarily for making money. Just a fun little way to see if we can crunch some numbers, do a little math, and see if we can find value in these selections. Nothing more, nothing less. If you are of legal age in a betting jurisdiction and you want to tail my bets, you're more than welcome to do so. But please do so at your own risk. Have a game plan going in. Spend only what you can afford to lose. Don't chase losses. If you or a loved one is having troubles with problem gaming, there's a lot of resources online that you can refer to for help on that matter. Responsibleplay.org, haveagameplan.org, 2 great examples of these resources to help you get on the narrow path back to recovery. With that all being said, time to dive in to our 7-game Week 17 slate. Here we go. We'll get things started with a 7 o'clock Saturday game. That is Eastern time, by the way, of the Massachusetts Pirates going on the road, taking on the desperate San Antonio Gunslingers. The folks over at DraftKings are favoring the Gunslingers by a field goal. The over-under is set at 94.5. The Pirates plus 124 money line, San Antonio minus 148. And I feel like playoff scenarios definitely factor into the betting lines for this game, because San Antonio absolutely must win this game in order to have any shot at the playoffs. In fact, they are actually eliminated even if they win this game if Arizona wins against Tucson on Sunday. So desperate times for Tom Menas and his Gunslingers, who have been playing absolutely crazy football. the past few weeks. Each of their past 3 games has gone over 100 points. There's absolutely no reason to think that this game is going to be anything different. But I am going to actually withhold going on the over for this game, even though I do feel like it is a great play. This is a game that I just cannot see San Antonio losing really in any capacity. 3 points is not a whole lot to lay here, especially when going up against a team that historically is 2-13 on the road against the spread. Granted, those 2 wins have come in the past 2 road games that the Pirates have played. But that was against Jacksonville, and the other one was a backdoor cover against Frisco. Let's be perfectly honest about that. At their A game, the Gunslingers should be able to crack 50 once again. As long as their defense can get some stops on Alejandro Benefield, Jimmy Robinson and company, this should be a reasonably confident bet. So for me, it is Gunslingers -3. And you know that Tom Manas will surely want to beat them by 20. Next up, an 8 o'clock kickoff between the Jacksonville Sharks and the Iowa Barnstormers, 2 teams that are on the outside looking in. This is basically an elimination game. One in which Iowa is favored by 5 in the hook. Over-under is 83.5. Jacksonville plus 170 money line and Iowa -205. This is a weird line to me because this feels like 2 teams going in opposite directions. Before last week's game, Iowa released their starting quarterback, Daniel Smith. And just leading up to this game, they put one of their best players, Robert Washington, running back, on injured reserve. Meanwhile, the Sharks with Caleb Barker at quarterback, looking very strong in their win at Sioux Falls last week. I feel like this line factors a little bit too much of this past season results in. On paper, it is a game that Iowa should be able to win. But I just doubt their drive to have that. They'll certainly want to play well in front of their home fans. But it's going to be a challenge holding up Caleb Barker. He proved why he was able to lead Northern Arizona to a championship in 2022 with last week's showing. So this is going to be another underdog cover pick. It is at 5.5. I would be absolutely all over this if it was plus 6.5, but such is life. We got to eat the point. Take the 5.5. And that over-under is pretty interesting too. But again, it's a situation where Jacksonville was so hot on overs for like a month. For 2 months, actually. And then they've had their past couple games go under. So even at 83.5, I'm not sure if that cashes, particularly with Iowa having struggled on offense in their first game in the post-Daniel Smith era. So we've got nothing to lose. We're going to go for it here. Jacksonville plus 5.5. Another 8 o'clock kick. Massive rivalry game here. We've got the Sioux Falls Storm and the Quad City Steamwheelers. Home side being favored by 6 in the hook. Over-under is set at 88.5. Sioux Falls is plus 210 money line and Quad City -258. And see previous comment from Mass San Antonio. This is a game that Quad City needs to win. They're 6-7 right now. They are a game above Tulsa for that 4th and final spot in the standings. And the Steamwheelers have arguably the easiest schedule amongst the remaining teams in contention. Starting with this game against the only team in the East that's been eliminated to this point, the Sioux Falls Storm. The transition from Lorenzo Brown to Jaya Wright at the quarterback position, it's gone a bit bumpy. They've only averaged around 34, 35 points a game since letting him take over. And we know what the Quad City offensive ceiling is. If they get their running game going and Judd Erickson can mix it up with some pretty clutch passes, there's absolutely no reason why the Steam Wheelers can't score 50 points in this game. My only reservation against going against Quad City here is the fact that these rivalry games have a way of going completely sideways from time to time. But necessity, in my mind, dictates result. So we are going to lay the points here. We're doing it at minus 115 here, so we're laying an additional nickel as well. But that's usually an indication of a bet that ultimately winds up panning out more often than not. So it is my play that I'm going to go with here. This team's going to be hungry for a win. Sioux Falls is going to be hungry to see what positive developments that they can somehow muster up leading up to 2025 in what has been a largely disappointing season. So Quad City covers at minus 6.5 on Saturday night in Moline. We'll wrap Saturday up with a 9:05 kickoff between Vegas and San Diego. This is the provisional 3rd seed versus 2 seed matchup if the playoffs started today. Only difference is the 3rd seed San Diego would be going to Vegas. But for Saturday's game, it is in Pechanga Arena. San Diego is favored by 2.5. Over-under is 97.5. Vegas plus 114 money line. San Diego minus 135. And when lines opened up, I was back and forth between myself for a good 15, 20 minutes debating how I wanted to go about picking this game. Because no doubt, both teams are dang good. Either one worthy of representing the Western Conference in the IFL championship game. San Diego, 9-5. All of their losses have been crazily close, combined 12 points. For Vegas, they had a rough 3-game losing streak in the middle of the season, but aside from that, have been really, really good. Jerome Johnson, in particular, putting together a pretty solid case for at least some MVP discussion. There's been a couple games where he struggled with consistency, but other games where he scores 8 or 9 touchdowns. So the ceilings of both offenses, definitely there, especially when considering their last matchup in Henderson. That was back in early May. We had 132 combined points, and that stood as the highest scoring IFL game of the season up until a couple weeks ago when Northern Arizona and San Antonio decided not to play defense. But what really struck my eye about this pick in the end is that this is just the 3rd time all season that the Nighthawks have been set as the underdog. And in those 2 prior games, they won outright each time. That determination is what guides my pick to Vegas Nighthawks outright. We're not going to be able to get Vegas at plus money for the rest of the regular season. So even though San Diego has kind of been the cover kings of the IFL this season, it's not too far-fetched of a thought to visualize Vegas going in and winning this game. It's a result that I absolutely feel like is in their repertoire. And it is the pick that I'm confident in going with here. So we're going to go with the road underdog, Vegas at plus 114. Monica saying Strike Force wins 48-45. It's a pretty bold pick right there. And find it interesting that Jerome Johnson was benched for Max Myler in Green Bay last year. And now they're leading 2 of the top teams in the league. Yeah, it is. I think Johnson actually got injured in the early part of last season. That forced Myler into it. And then Myler did a really nice job filling the void in his absence. And I feel like that stretch of time gave Green Bay enough of confidence to fully entrust the reins to Myler. And he's been leading that offense ever since. Kind of a win-win for both teams, really, between Green Bay and Vegas. Imagine if both wind up in the championship, the storylines that would generate. Sunday, 3 games, triple header. We'll start with the 5 o'clock kick between Frisco and Duke City. This is Frisco favored by 10 in the hook, over under 86.5. No money line bet available with the double-digit point spread. So these two teams have met once already. That was a 49-40 Frisco win. I think that was the second game of the season for both teams. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic leading up to this one. And again, I was kind of debating whether to go with the spread, whether to go with the total. And ultimately, I figured, hey, we haven't gone with the total yet. So let's talk about it. Frisco, we know they can score at will. Their rushing attack, that three-headed monster of Edwards, Rankin, and Martez Carter, absolutely nobody's been able to stop them in the past month. And this will be a really stiff test for a Duke City team that has proven that they can play pretty well defensively. But I look at this over at 86.5, and I look at Frisco 10-4 to the over. And even though Duke City has been a really good team betting on the under, we have to take this over at 86.5. We have to. Frisco could get like 80% of the way here all by themselves if things go absolutely right for them. And really, one of the keys to seeing this bet through will be, does this game stay at the very least competitive throughout the majority of the game, to where both teams will be intent on putting points on the board? And we've seen multiple games this year, really, where Frisco, like it or not, they score a touchdown, might not even matter in terms of dictating the outcome of the game. They will get into the end zone however they can, and it might make a difference for us here. So give me Frisco Duke City over 86.5. I feel like this will be a very popular public pick as well. But remember, you heard it here first. All right. 6 o'clock Eastern time kickoff. Northern Arizona Wranglers taking on the Bay Area Panthers. It has been a trying time for Northern Arizona throughout this week. It's a game that comes at really an opportune time for them. It is a 10-point spread favoring Bay Area. The over-under is 92.5, and no money line bet is available. And man, this is a tough one, like I said, for Northern Arizona, having to juggle around not only the mental and physical component of trying to make a playoff push. They have arguably the most difficult emotional aspect of it with the passing of their coach, David Moran. So if they were to pull out something special in this game, that honestly might be the story of the season. But another thing that has been the story of this season, and this is a pick that we kind of went against the grain with in last week's game involving the Panthers. I am going to take the under at 92.5. Eventually, this streak of Northern Arizona Wranglers games reaching 100 points is going to come to an end. What better way for it to come to an end than by playing against a team that's only given up about 30.5 points per game in the past 5 or 6 games? This Panthers defense is elite. They know how to get to the quarterback. That's how they're able to generate a bunch of sacks, interceptions, basically making offense a living hell for whoever's lined up against them. But yeah, this is a really good number. especially when considering that 88.5, 89.5 statistic that we came up with. I think Bay Area closes this one out and doesn't allow much in the way of point scoring. So give me the under at 92.5 between Northern Arizona and Bay Area. Our seventh and final game of the slate. This is another 6 o'clock kick. Sunday afternoon showdown between the Tucson Sugar Skulls and the Arizona Rattlers. Home side is getting 14, or Tucson's given 14.5. Over under is 86.5 and no money line bet available. I feel like this game is not too dissimilar from the game that the Rattlers played 6 days ago, or will have played 6 days ago, back on Saturday against the Iowa Barnstormers. There was a team that was kind of down and out, already having an eye towards 2025. And we saw what happened. Iowa dominated. They won that game by 29 points. Tucson, I'm pretty convinced that they've had a different starting quarterback each week for the last 7 weeks. I don't know who's going to start for them. And that's a similar problem that Iowa had, whether it starts to start their new signing Grisham or Brandon Alt. They ended up going with Alt. Young guy ends up throwing 3 interceptions. So whoever starts at quarterback for Tucson, it's going to be a very, very tall task in front of them. Normally, I don't like giving teams more than 2 touchdowns on the spread. But give me one good reason why Arizona can't win this game by 29 as well. They're going to put up points. Even though Tucson's defense has been fairly pesky in recent weeks and in recent matchups with Arizona. But as I recall, they didn't have to face Dalton Sneed in that one game where they ended up losing, but they did backdoor cover on me. Arizona should easily get to at least 50 points. So if the defense holds Tucson to under 35, generate a few takeaways, I think that gets the job done here. So give Arizona another convincing win or lay in 14.5 for them to get a win, which, as I said, would eliminate the San Antonio Gunslingers from playoff contention. Possibly the Wranglers as well if Bay Area wins their game. Okie doke. Time for the 3-leg parlay of the week. We have had all but one of these fail this season. Stop me if you've heard this one before. I've got a good feeling about this one. So here we go. Our first leg is going to involve Massachusetts San Antonio. We must take this over here. It's 94.5. San Antonio is going to be playing with their butts on fire. We're going to get 50 points from San Antonio. We're probably going to get 50 points from Massachusetts as well, if we're being honest. But really, this game is going to come down to efficiency and tempo, something that the Gunslingers have exhibited in pretty much the most perfect way possible. So this is a no-doubter for my first leg. Massachusetts, San Antonio, over 94.5. The second leg, I have my eyes on Sioux Falls and Quad City, but I was back and forth for quite some time on whether to go point total or just to eat a bunch of potential winnings and go Quad City on the money line. I ended up going Quad City on the money line because I do believe that they win this game convincingly. And coupled with a potential high-scoring affair between the Pirates and the Guns, sets us up well for perhaps having some sort of hope going into Sunday of seeing one of these trebles go through. I think originally I had the over for this game, but then after seeing Sioux Falls kind of struggle on offense past few weeks, I pivoted back to Quad City minus 258. Spoiler alert, it still keeps us on pace to meet our plus 400 minimum odds requirement, which ultimately gets fulfilled when we pick Tucson and Arizona over 86.5. Like I said before, we know Arizona's going to hold their end of the bargain on this, but we may get just enough Tucson offense if they're able to perhaps get their running game going or something like that. Because remember, Arizona's run defense is still not particularly great. We could see a bunch of points scored here. Anything like 60 to 42, somewhere along those lines, would be able to cash both our single game slip as well as the parlay. So it is, aside from the Jacksonville, Iowa 83.5 total, this represents the second lowest total of the week, tied with Frisco, Duke City. So let's hope that third leg rounds this thing out and sends us to some profit here. Over 94.5, Mass San Antonio. Quad City outright minus 258. Tucson, Arizona over 86.5. If we put $10 on it, we could see a payout of $50 and a fistful of coins. So that is my decision on the parlay. We will clear that. And the futures page has been a little bit wacky on DraftKings today for some reason. Fortunately, I was able to get a snapshot of it. So this is how things look heading into week 17. The top three of the podium remain completely unchanged, both the order of the teams and their odds. But Massachusetts back in three figures with their odds. They were plus 1,300 last week. They're now down to plus 800. Kind of ridiculous considering that 2 weeks ago they were plus 2,500. So anybody that had sprinkled a little bit on that future at plus 2,500 on DraftKings, you can now cash out for 2 times your amount, which is nuts. San Diego's 10 to 1, Northern Arizona 20 to 1, and the Wranglers now face an uphill climb to get back into the playoffs. But yeah, as far as value picks go here, I'm very intrigued by Vegas at plus 450 at this stage. There's a unique factor here that goes into that sort of line of thinking, because if you think about it, Vegas in the playoffs, should they get there, only needs to win technically 2 games in the playoffs to attain home turf advantage for the IFL championship game. Because remember, it's going down at Lee's Family Forum in Anderson. Should the Nighthawks make it, it's basically the biggest home turf advantage that you could get. So at plus 450, definitely worth something, in my opinion. As far as the long shots go, San Diego at 10 to 1. Because all season long, they've made games competitive, particularly against the cream of the crop of this league. And when teams can do that, and you put that sort of play into an isolated 60-minute sample size, we've seen anything can happen. Just look at last year when a 4-seed upset a 1-seed, when the Wranglers took down the Rattlers in that opening round. Really memorable game. Would it be a total shock to see that happen in either conference this year? So that's kind of my thoughts on the futures, and that is going to wrap up Wager Wednesday for week 17. Hope you guys enjoyed some of the chatter about the league, the week to come. I hope you all have a happy 4th of July with your friends, family, and loved ones. Go celebrate. Don't celebrate too hard, because come the end of this weekend. We'll have a date with the cashier. I'll see you there, and have a great day, everyone.